Here's a thrilling, twist-filled story just for you. Packed with intrigue, secrets, and unexpected turns. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Chapter 1. The Betrayal. I always thought betrayal was something that happened to other people. Stories you read about, shake your head at, and feel sorry for. I never imagined I'd be the protagonist of such a cruel tale. It all started on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just come home early from work, a rare stroke of luck. The house was too quiet until I heard laughter from our bedroom. My heart pounded as I crept upstairs, each step a hammer driving nails into my gut. When I pushed, the door open, I found my wife, Claire, tangled in the sheets with her so-called friend, Greg. She screamed. Greg scrambled, grabbing his pants like a cornered rat. And me? I just stood there, numb, staring at the woman I had promised my life to. Her excuses were pathetic. It was a mistake, Jason. It didn't mean anything. But her face, full of shame yet lacking true remorse, told me everything I needed to know. I walked out that night and never looked back. Chapter 2. Rebuilding and New Beginnings. The divorce was swift. I refused to play games or drag things out. She got the house. I got my dignity. But dignity doesn't keep you warm at night, and the loneliness was suffocating. Months passed, and I buried myself in work. Then, one evening at a bookstore, I met Emma. She was different. Bright-eyed, sharp-witted, and unafraid to challenge me. She had a past of her own, scars she didn't try to hide, and a strength that made me admire her instantly. What started as casual conversations turned into late-night phone calls. Those phone calls became dates, and before I knew it, I was falling. Hard. Emma taught me how to laugh again, how to trust, how to live. Chapter 3. The Past Clause. Back just when I thought I had left the past behind, it came knocking. One night, my phone buzzed. Claire. I ignored it. Then came the texts. Jason, I need to talk. It's important. Weeks passed, and I continued to ignore her, until one evening, Emma and I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My gut twisted. I reached for the baseball bat behind the door and stepped inside cautiously. Sitting on my couch, a glass of wine in hand, was Claire. Emma tensed beside me, but I motioned for her to stay back. You broke in? I said, keeping my voice steady. Claire smiled, a sad, desperate smile. You never answered my calls. I exhaled sharply. That's because I have nothing to say to you. She set the glass down and stood. Jason, I made a mistake. I was stupid, I was selfish, and I lost the best thing in my life, but I can't. I can't let you go, not like this, Emma scoffed. You had your chance. Claire turned to her, eyes dark with something unreadable. This has nothing to do with you, Emma smirked. Oh, but it does. I stepped between them. Claire, leave. But she didn't. Chapter 4. The Truth Unraveled. The harassment escalated. Calls from unknown numbers, messages from fake accounts, even people showing up at my work asking about Jason and his new girlfriend. Claire was behind it all, of course. One night I got an email that made my blood run cold. Attached was a photo of Emma and me at dinner taken from outside the restaurant. She's watching us, Emma whispered, gripping my arm. I went straight to the police, filed a restraining order, but Claire was cunning. Nothing she did was illegal enough to warrant immediate action. Then came the accident. Emma was crossing the street when a car came out of nowhere. Brakes screeched. I barely managed to pull her back in time. The car vanished into the night. That was it. I wasn't going to let Claire win. Chapter 5. The final move I dug, I investigated, and what I found shook me. Claire had spiraled into debt after the divorce. She had hired Greg, yes, her affair partner, to keep tabs on me and Emma, hoping to sabotage my happiness. The car? That was Greg's doing. I confronted Claire, this time with the police beside me, her face twisted when they snapped the cuffs on her wrists. As she was led away, she hissed, "You think this is over?" I smirked. "No, Claire, I know it is." Epilogue. With Claire behind bars and Greg arrested for attempted assault, Emma and I finally found peace. We moved to a new city, started fresh, and one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I got down on one knee. Emma laughed, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Yes." I had walked through fire, survived betrayal, and faced madness. But in the end, I found something real, something worth fighting for, and this time, I wasn't looking back. The end. How's that for a thrilling ride? Let me know if you want any twists added. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love, until my ex tried. Part 2. The Shadows of the Past. Chapter 6. A whisper in the dark life was finally settling into something beautiful. Emma and I moved into a new house. Nothing extravagant, just a place that felt ours. A place untouched by my past. Or so I thought. One evening, after a late shift at work, I pulled into our driveway and noticed something strange. The porch light flickered, though I had changed the bulb only a week ago. A chill crawled up my spine. Inside, Emma was curled up on the couch, reading. She looked up and smiled. "Long day?" I nodded, forcing a smile. But something gnawed at me. "Did you notice anything weird today?" She frowned. "Like what?" I hesitated. Never mind. But as I got ready for bed, I checked the front door again. The lock felt loose. Chapter 7. The Warning. A week later, I got a call. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A voice whispered, "She's not done." Then the line went dead. My stomach knotted. Was it Claire? Greg? Someone else? I tried to brush it off, but when I went to get coffee the next morning, the barista handed me a napkin along with my cup, scrawled on it in red ink. "You stole my life. Now I'll take yours." I gripped the napkin so tightly my knuckles turned white. Claire was in jail. Greg was in jail. So who the hell was doing this? Chapter 8. The Stranger in the Shadows. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard something outside. Soft footsteps on the gravel. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept toward the window. A dark figure stood near the tree line, just outside the reach of our porch light. Watching. Waiting. Moved fast, throwing open the door and charging outside. "Hey!" But by the time I reached the tree line, the figure was gone. I didn't sleep at all that night. Chapter 9. The Hidden Truth. The next day, I dug deeper into Claire's arrest records, hoping for some kind of lead. That's when I saw something that made my blood turn ice cold. Claire had been released 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't been notified. I showed Emma the documents, my hands shaking. "She's out." Emma swallowed hard. "You think she's behind this?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." Chapter 10. The Home Invasion. That night, we locked every door, every window, but it didn't matter. At 3:14 a.m., we woke to the sound of shattering glass. I grabbed the bat and pushed Emma behind me. "Call the police!" She fumbled for her phone as I moved toward the noise, our back window completely smashed in. Footsteps creaked inside the house, then a voice, soft, taunting. "Jason, Jason, Jason, you never should have left me." "Claire." I gritted my teeth. "You need to leave, Claire." She stepped into the dim hallway light, a knife glinting in her hand. Her once beautiful face was twisted with rage, eyes hollow and wild. "I gave you everything," she whispered, "and you threw me away." The sirens wailed in the distance. Claire's eyes flicked toward the front door. She knew time was running. Out. In a flash, she lunged. I swung the bat. The impact sent her sprawling just as the front door burst open and cops flooded in. Claire screamed as they tackled her, yanking the knife from her hand. It was over. For real this time. Epilogue. Anew. Dawn Claire was sentenced to 15 years. No parole. No escape. Emma and I moved again. This time, far away. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emma squeezed my hand. She's really gone. I exhaled. Yeah, she is. For the first time in years, I believed it, and I finally felt free. The end. Caught my wife cheating, moved on and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 3. The nightmare isn't over. Chapter 11. The letter 3 months passed. Emma and I were finally happy. No more threats, no more shadows lurking at the edge of our lives. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. No postage stamp. Someone had left it directly in our mailbox. My stomach twisted as I unfolded the paper. Did you really think prison could hold me? See you soon. C. Emma read over my shoulder, her face paling. This has to be a joke, right? I clenched my jaw. Claire had been sentenced. She couldn't be out. Could she? Chapter 12. The Impossible Escape. I called the prison immediately. The officer on the phone sounded confused. Claire Matthews? No, she's still here. Relief flooded me. But then he hesitated. Well, technically, I gripped the phone. What do you mean, technically? He sighed. She's in a psychiatric ward now. She had a mental breakdown a few weeks ago. She's under heavy watch. Emma looked at me anxiously. So she couldn't have sent the letter? I hung up, but the unease in my gut wouldn't leave. If Claire was locked up, who wrote the letter? Chapter 13. The Unfinished Business. That night, another message arrived. This time scrawled across our front door in red paint. You took something from me. Now I'll take something from you. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jason, we need to leave. Now! I scanned the street, heart hammering. Someone had come onto our property, right under our noses. I wasn't going to run this time, I was going to fight. Chapter 14. The other one. I dug into Claire's past, looking for anyone who might be doing this on her behalf. And then I found it. Claire had a sister, Madeline Matthews. I had never met her. Claire never spoke about her. But after some deep research, I learned that Madeline had been in and out of psychiatric facilities for years. And now, she was missing. Chapter 15. The Face in the Dark. We set up cameras around the house. I barely slept, watching the live feeds all night. Then, at 2:47 a.m., I saw her, a figure, tall, thin, standing motionless in the backyard. Long, tangled hair. She lifted her head and, through the grainy feed, I saw her face. Not Claire. Madeline. She grinned at the camera. Then she held up a knife. I bolted outside, bat in hand, but by the time I reached the yard, she was gone. Chapter 16. The Final Showdown. The police were useless. They took a report, but said there was no immediate threat. 2 nights later, that changed. At 3 a.m., we woke to the sound of shattering glass. I grabbed my gun. Emma called 911. Footsteps. Heavy. Coming up the stairs. I aimed at the bedroom door. I swear to God, if you take one more step... The door burst open. Madeline stood there, wild-eyed, knife raised. She lunged. I fired. The shot rang through. The house. Madeline collapsed, the knife clattering to the floor. The police arrived moments later. Madeline was still alive, barely. As they took her away, she whispered, "She'll never stop." I stared at her, ice filling my veins. "Claire?" She grinned through the pain. "No, me." Epilogue. The end? Madeline survived. She's in a psychiatric hospital now, the same one as Claire. Emma and I moved again, this time across the country. New names. New life. But some nights I wake up, heart pounding, feeling like someone's watching, like it's not over, because deep down, I know it never really is. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love, until my ex tried. Part 4. The Ghost That Wouldn't Die. Chapter 17. A New Beginning, a Lingering Shadow. Emma and I moved again, this time to a secluded house in the mountains, far from the city, far from the past. We changed our numbers, deleted social media, and tried to forget. For 6 months, life was peaceful. Then, one morning, a single white envelope appeared on our doorstep. No stamps, no handwriting, just a single playing card inside, the Queen of Spades. Emma shuddered. What does it mean? I exhaled slowly. It's a warning. Chapter 18. A Familiar Nightmare. The card sent me spiraling. Madeline was locked up. Claire was locked up. So who the hell was sending messages? I started seeing shadows where there were none. I felt eyes on me in crowded places. At night, I double-checked every lock, every window. Then, another envelope arrived. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of Emma, taken through our bedroom window. Chapter 19. The Missing Piece. I dove back into Claire's family history, desperate for answers. That's when I found it. Claire and Madeline weren't 2 sisters. They were 3. Their youngest sibling, Evelyn Matthews, had vanished years ago. No death certificate. No criminal record. No trace. Until now. Chapter 20. The third sister, Emma, and I stayed up all night, waiting, watching. We knew she would come. At 3:33 a.m., we heard footsteps on the gravel. A shadow moved outside our bedroom. Window, then bang! The power went out. I grabbed my gun, heart pounding. "Emma, stay behind me." From the hallway, a voice whispered, "You took them from me." My blood ran cold. Evelyn. Chapter 21. The End Game. I moved toward the sound, gun raised. "You don't have to do this, Evelyn," she laughed. "Oh, but I do." Then, silence, until the closet door creaked open. I spun, but she was already lunging. The knife slashed across my arm, burning like fire. I crashed backward as Emma screamed. Evelyn loomed over me, eyes wild, blade glinting in the darkness. "They never loved you the way I did." Before she could strike again, a gunshot rang out. Emma. Evelyn crumpled to the floor, clutching her side. The police arrived minutes later. This time, they took her away for good. Epilogue. A life without ghosts. Evelyn was committed to a maximum security psychiatric facility. Unlike her sisters, she wouldn't be getting out. Emma and I moved one last time. New names, new home, and for the first time in years I truly believed the nightmare was over, or at least I hoped it was. The end. Caught my wife cheating, moved on and found new love, until my ex tried. Part 5. The One I Never Saw. Coming. Chapter 22. A Year of Silence. For the first time in a long time, life was normal. Emma and I had settled into a quiet town by the coast. New identities, new jobs, new everything. No more letters, no more shadows in the night. Evelyn was locked away. Claire and Madeline were still in psychiatric care. It was over, or so I thought. Chapter 23. The message from the past own evening, I was going through old files on my laptop when I noticed an unread email. It had been sent months ago. No subject line, no sender information, just a single sentence. It was never about Claire. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Who sent this? And if it wasn't about Claire, then who the hell was it about? Chapter 24. The stranger in the cafe, I started watching my surroundings again, checking over my shoulder, keeping my gun closer. 1. Afternoon, Emma and I were at a small cafe when I saw a man watching us. Tall, dark suit, slicked back hair. He never ordered anything, just stared. When we got up to leave, he followed. I stopped at the exit, turned to face him. "Something you want?" He smiled. "You don't know, do you?" My stomach tightened. "Know what?" He leaned in, whispered, "You were never supposed to survive." Then he walked away. Chapter 25. The missing Linky went back and reread every detail of my past, the affairs, the stalking, the break-ins, the attempted murders. I had always assumed it was about Claire, about a jealous, obsessed ex-wife who couldn't handle my happiness, but the deeper I dug, the more I realized something terrifying. Claire, Madeline, and Evelyn weren't working alone. Chapter 26. The organization. I spent weeks unraveling the truth. Claire's real past was buried deep. She wasn't just some bitter ex-wife. She had been part of something bigger, a network, a secret group of people who destroyed lives for sport. They didn't just cheat and manipulate, they hunted, and I was their latest game. You were never supposed to survive. The man in the cafe knew, which meant they weren't done. Chapter 27. The trap. I needed to end it. I set a trap. I sent out a fake message, pretending I wanted to make amends with Claire, that I missed her, that I wanted to talk. Within 24 hours, someone broke into our house. Not Claire. Not Evelyn. A man in a suit. I was waiting for him. The second he stepped inside, I pressed my gun to his temple. "Who are you?" He smirked. "You'll never stop us." I tied him up, took his phone, and what I found inside made my blood turn. To ice, a list of names. Mine was just one of many. Chapter 28. The war begins. The police were useless. This wasn't a case they could solve. I had only one choice: take them down myself. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a hunter, and I was going to burn their whole operation to the ground. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 6. The Hunters Become the Hunted. Chapter 29. The beginning of the end, I sat in my darkened living room, staring at the phone I had taken from the man who broke into my house. His face was still bruised from the conversation we had before I dumped him miles away, tied up, without his phone. I had bought myself time, but time wasn't enough. I needed answers. Chapter 30. The names on the list on. His phone had over 20 names. Some had been crossed out. I recognized a few. Missing persons cases. People who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor. And now, I was a threat to them. Chapter 31. The call I shouldn't have made. I dialed the first unmarked number in the phone. It rang once, twice. Then, a voice answered. "You should have run when you had the chance." Click. I stared at the phone, pulse pounding. They knew, and they were coming. Chapter 32. Emma's Secret. I rushed upstairs, grabbed Emma. "We have to go, now." She looked at me, too calm. "Jason," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." Cold weight settled in my stomach. "What?" She hesitated. Then, "I knew about them." The world spun. "What?" Emma swallowed hard. "I didn't know everything, but I was supposed to watch you. Report back. At first I thought it was just a weird security job. I didn't know what they really did." I took a step back. "Emma, who hired you?" She looked away. "Claire. Chapter me. 33. The betrayal rage, confusion, pain. It all hit me at once. "Were you ever on my side?" I asked, voice shaking. Tears welled in her eyes. "Jason, I fell in love with you. I chose you. That's why I stopped reporting to them. That's why they're after us now." I wanted to believe her, but how could I? A loud thump echoed from downstairs. We weren't alone anymore. Chapter 34. The fight for survival. I grabbed my gun and pulled Emma behind me. "If you set me up, I swear to God—" "I didn't," she whispered. "But I can get us out." Footsteps, multiple people, moving fast. Emma pointed to the back door. "Trust me. I had no choice. We ran. Bullets shattered the windows as—" We darted into the woods behind our house. Shadows moved through the trees, hunting us. The game had begun. Chapter 35. The escape plan Emma led me through an old hiking trail. I have a car stashed nearby. I knew this day would come. I was still grappling with the truth, but I couldn't focus on that now. The only thing that mattered was surviving. We reached the car, a black SUV. Emma fumbled with the keys as headlights flickered in the distance. "They found us," I muttered. Then, boom, the SUV exploded. I was thrown back by the blast, ears ringing. Emma screamed. Through the smoke, figures emerged, armed, and at the front of them, Claire, Chapter 36. Claire's revenge, I coughed, pushing myself up. "You were supposed to be locked up," Claire smiled. "Oh, Jason, you should know by now, I always have a way out." Emma stepped in front of me. "Claire, don't do this." Claire tilted her head. "Sweetheart, you were useful for a time. But now—" She raised a gun. "Now you're just in the way." Before she could fire, I tackled her. Gunshots exploded around us. I grabbed Claire's wrist, twisting the gun free. She fought like a wild animal, but I had rage on my side. I slammed her to the ground, gun aimed at her head. She smiled. "You can kill me, Jason," she whispered, "but you'll never stop them." More figures emerged from the darkness. Too many. Emma grabbed my arm. "We have to run." I hesitated. Then, we ran. Chapter 37. The final move. We escaped into the city. Changed cars, changed clothes. I knew one thing. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. It wasn't just about revenge. It was war. And I was done running. I was going to end this. For good. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 7. The Last Move. Chapter 38. The Price of Truth. Emma and I didn't stop running until we reached a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. I bolted the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and sat on the edge of the bed, still gripping the gun. Emma was shaking. "What now?" she whispered. I exhaled, forcing my mind to focus. "Now, we find out who's really pulling the strings." Because Claire was just a pawn, and I was done playing their game. Chapter 39. The name in the shadows. I powered up the stolen phone from Claire's man. Scrolling through the encrypted messages, one name kept popping up. Rex. Who the hell was Rex? Emma paled when she saw it. "Jason, I've heard that name before." She hesitated. When Claire first hired me, I wasn't working for her directly. She answered to someone else. I clenched my jaw. Let me guess. Rex. Emma nodded. I stared at the name on the screen. Claire, Madeline, and Evelyn had been dangerous, but they weren't the true masterminds. This was bigger, and I was about to rip it apart. Chapter 40. The Trap. I said I used the stolen phone to send a message. It's done. I have them. Where do you want the drop? Less than a minute later, a reply. Came through. Warehouse. Midnight. You know the place. I turned to Emma. Do you? She swallowed. Yes. And if we go there, we don't leave alive. I checked my gun. Then we don't go to talk. Chapter 41. The warehouse. The abandoned warehouse sat on the outskirts of the city. No cameras. No witnesses. Perfect for a slaughter. I hid in the rafters, watching as 3 SUVs pulled in. Men in suits. Armed. Dangerous. And at the center of them, Rex. He wasn't what I expected. No scars, no monstrous presence, just a calm, collected man in a black coat, sipping coffee like he wasn't orchestrating murders. Emma and I exchanged a look. I exhaled. Showtime? Chapter 42. The Bloodbath. The moment Rex stepped forward, I fired. The bullet grazed his shoulder. His men reacted fast, too fast. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the warehouse. Emma and I moved like ghosts, taking them down one by one. Rex disappeared in the chaos. I chased him through the shadows, my heart beat a war drum in my chest. I found him near the exit, clutching his wounded shoulder. He smiled. You have no idea what you've done. I leveled the gun at his head. You destroyed my life. Now I destroy yours. He laughed. Jason, I didn't choose you. Claire did. I froze. Rex's grin widened. She picked you to play the game, to be the prey. And now? His eyes darkened. Now you're the hunter. A sickening realization hit me. Claire hadn't just been obsessed with me, she had been grooming me, turning me into something else, and I had fallen for it. Chapter 43. The last bullet Rex lunged. I fired. The shot echoed in the empty space. Rex crumpled. His men were dead. His empire, falling. I stood there gripping the gun, breathing heavily. Emma touched my arm. It's over. I wasn't sure it was, because in that moment I realized I wasn't the same man who started this, and I never would be again. Epilogue. The price of survival. We disappeared. New names, new identities, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still feel it. The hunt, the blood, the whispers of a game that would never truly end. I had survived. But at what cost? The end. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 8. The Hunt Never Ends. Chapter 44. The Survivor's Curse. Emma and I vanished after the warehouse massacre. New names, new city, new lives, but I couldn't escape. The feeling that someone was still watching, that the game wasn't over. And then, one night, a package arrived at our doorstep. No return address, no name. Inside was a single item, a playing card, the King of Spades. Chapter 45. The final player, Emma's face went pale when she saw it. What does it mean? I asked. She swallowed hard. The king? That's not Rex. I clenched my jaw. Then who is it? She hesitated. Then, in a whisper, the real mastermind. Rex hadn't been the top. There was someone else. And now, they were coming for us. Chapter 46. The call from the grave. That night, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A distorted voice whispered, "Did you really think you could win?" My grip tightened. "Who are you?" Soft laughter. the one who started it all. And then, click. The line went dead. Chapter 47. The ghost of Claire. I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything in my head. Claire had picked me for this game. But why? Had I really escaped her influence? Or was I still playing her game without realizing it? Then another thought hit me. What if Claire wasn't dead? I had never seen a body, never confirmed it. What if she had orchestrated everything? What if she was still out there? Chapter 48. The final war begins. I looked at Emma. We have to go. Back, I said. Her eyes widened. Back where? I loaded my gun. To the beginning, because if Claire was still out there, I had to end this, for good. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 9. The Shadow Behind the Throne. Chapter 49. Back to the beginning. We were done running. Emma and I retraced every step. Back to the city, back to where it all started. If the real mastermind was still out there, hiding in the shadows, we would bring them into the light. And if Claire was alive, I would finish what I started. Chapter 50. The dead don't stay. Dead, I broke into a private records database. Claire's official death certificate was there, except for one problem. The autopsy report was missing. Emma hovered behind me, reading over my shoulder. That's impossible. They wouldn't have declared her dead without an autopsy. My blood turned to ice. Unless someone wanted the world to believe she was dead. Someone powerful. Someone still playing the game. Chapter 51. The Visit. The next day I got an invitation, handwritten, delivered to our motel. No return address, no explanation, just a time, a location, and a signature. I clenched my jaw. Claire, she was alive, and she wanted to see me. Chapter 52. The meeting. Emma begged me not to go, but I had to. I arrived at an abandoned estate just outside the city. The gates were rusted. The house, falling apart. I stepped inside, and there she was. Claire, sitting in an old armchair, sipping wine as if we were old friends. Hello, Jason. I didn't move. You're supposed to be dead, she smirked. And yet, here I am. Chapter 53. The truth I never expected. I raised my gun. Give me one reason why I shouldn't end this now. Claire sighed, swirling her wine. Because I wasn't the one pulling the strings, Jason. I was just another piece on the board. I gritted my teeth. Then who's behind this? She leaned forward. The king. A chill ran down my spine. The king of spades, I whispered. Claire nodded. You felt it, haven't you? The game hasn't ended. That's because the real mastermind was never Rex. He was just a lieutenant. The true ruler is still out there. I exhaled slowly. The king, I murmured. Claire's eyes gleamed. And now, he's waiting for you. Chapter 54. The Invitation. A knock at the door. I turned, gun raised. No one was there. Just another package resting on the doorstep. I picked it up, pulse pounding. Inside was another playing card, the king of the spades, and beneath it, a single line of text. Welcome to the final game, Jason. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 10. Checkmate. Chapter 55. The invitation to hell. I stood there, gripping the playing card. The king of spades. The final move had begun. Emma hovered beside me, her voice barely a whisper. This is a trap, I exhaled, nodding. I know. But traps work both ways, and I was done playing by their rules. Chapter 56. Claire's last gambit, I turned back to Claire. "Tell me everything you know," she smirked. "Everything?" I leveled my gun at her. "Now!" Claire sighed, setting down her wine. "Fine. The king is different. He doesn't just kill his enemies, he breaks them, rewrites them." My grip tightened. "Meaning?" She hesitated. Then, "He doesn't want you dead, Jason. He wants you to become him." The words hit me like a hammer. Emma stiffened. "That's insane." Claire's smile was bitter. "Is it? Look at everything he's put you through, the betrayals, the losses, the blood. He's been shaping you, and now he's inviting you into his world to see if you'll take his place." A sickening realization settled in my gut. This was never about revenge. This was about succession, and I was the last piece left standing. Chapter 57. The Dead City. The address on the back of the playing card led us to an abandoned skyscraper on the outskirts of town. It was quiet. Too quiet. The perfect place for a final battle. I checked my gun. "You ready?" Emma nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. I wasn't sure if it was fear for me or of me. Chapter 58. The Throne Room. We entered the building, guns drawn. The top floor was untouched by time, luxury, elegance, a king's domain, and at the center, sitting in a massive leather chair, was a man in a tailored black suit, the king. He smiled as we entered. "Jason, welcome home." I didn't lower my gun. "Cut the crap! Who are you?" He stood adjusting his cufflinks. "I have gone by many names, but in this world, I am simply the king," Emma whispered. "He looks so ordinary," I finished. That was the terrifying part. No scars, no monstrous presence, just a man. And yet the weight of death hung around him like a cloak. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." I didn't move. "Why am I here?" The king chuckled. "Because, Jason, I am tired." He exhaled. "I have built an empire from the shadows, controlled governments, ended wars before they began. But I need a successor, and you—" His eyes gleamed. "You are perfect." Emma stiffened. "Jason, don't listen to him." I didn't. I leveled the gun at his head. "I'm not like you." The king smiled. "Aren't you?" Chapter 59. The Final Choice. He gestured around our room. "You could take my throne, end the game on your terms, or—" He leaned back. "You can try to kill me, but if you fail, everyone you love dies." Silence. I could feel Emma watching me, waiting to see what I'd do. The king smirked. "So tell me, Jason, are you the hunter or the prey?" I took a slow breath. Then I pulled the trigger. Chapter 60. Checkmate. The gunshot echoed through the room. The king's body jerked, then slumped forward, blood staining his suit. Silence. Emma stared. You did it." I exhaled, lowering the gun. "No, because as I stood there staring at the body of the man who had orchestrated everything, I realized something. The game wasn't over. It would never be over, because the king had been right about one thing. Someone had to take his place." I turned to Emma. She saw it in my eyes, the horror, the truth, and she whispered, "Jason, don't." But it was too late, because I finally understood. I wasn't the prey. I never had been. Was the hunter, and now I was the king. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love, until my ex tried. Part 11. The Rise of the King. Chapter 61. The Unseen. Hand Emma's eyes were wide with terror as she watched me. "Jason, no. Don't let this be what he wanted." I stood there, staring at the dead body of the king, the weight of his demise sinking in. I had won. But something felt different. Off. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the city below us. My pulse was still racing, but there was a strange calmness in my chest. I had taken his throne, but the cost was everything. Chapter 62. The illusion of control. I hadn't expected it to happen like this. I thought I would be free after I took the king's life. I thought his empire would crumble and I would reclaim control. But as the minutes passed, that sense of empowerment began to feel like a weight, like I was now tethered to something far larger than myself. Emma stepped forward slowly, her hand reaching out toward me, but I stepped back. "I'm fine," I said, my voice colder than I intended. But it wasn't fine. Everything I had once believed in, everything I thought I knew, was shattered. The king had been powerful, yes, but he was only the face of an even darker force, a force that would never let me go. I had taken his throne, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a sentence. Chapter 63. The game's new rules. The moment I sat in the king's chair, I felt something stir within the walls of the empire he had built, like I had opened a door to a realm of shadows, and the entities within were just waiting for me to step inside. The phone rang. I answered without thinking. A cold, mechanical voice spoke. "Jason, it's time to play the game." I froze. "You've claimed the throne, but understand this, Jason. You are not the first. You will not be the last. There are many who have played the game before you, and many more who will come after." A sickening realization gnawed at my gut. This wasn't an empire of people. It was an empire of ideas. And now, I was the one who had to maintain the illusion. "Who are you?" I whispered. The voice chuckled. "Does it matter? You'll learn soon enough. You're already playing." Chapter 64. Emma's betrayal that night. I found Emma in the hallway. She was staring at the phone as if waiting for something. "Who were you talking to?" I demanded. She flinched, her eyes avoiding mine. "No one." The lie was obvious. I stepped closer, my hand tightening into a fist. "Emma, what are you hiding?" Her voice cracked. "It's not what you think." I took another step forward, and the truth came tumbling out. "I knew you were going to become the king. I knew what this would mean. I didn't think you would survive the game, but I also didn't think I would be the one to stop you." I stared at her, anger boiling. "What the hell are you talking about?" Emma dropped her head. "I'm the one who set you up, Jason. I knew you were a pawn from the moment I met you. I wanted to keep you alive long enough so you could claim the throne, but I wasn't supposed to be part of this." I stepped back, the weight of her words sinking in. You used me?" She nodded. "It was never about love, Jason. It was always about making sure you became the king. You're part of the cycle now, and when the time comes, I will replace you." I couldn't breathe. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Claire had ever done. Chapter 65. The Fall of the King. As I stood there grappling with the truth, I realized something. Emma wasn't the only one playing this game. I was. And the longer I held on to the throne, the more I became what I hated. I wasn't just playing the game anymore. I was becoming it. The empire was built on lies, manipulation, and blood. And I had learned to wield it all, but now the question wasn't whether I could survive. It was whether I would destroy everything around me in the process. I made a decision. I wouldn't allow Emma to be the next piece on the board. I turned to face her. "It's over. This game ends tonight." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Jason, no. Don't do this." but I had already made up my mind. I walked to the desk where the king's papers lay. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number. The same cold voice answered. "Jason," it said, its tone mocking. "Are you ready to face your fate?" I took a deep breath. "I've been facing it all along." Then, with a final press of a button, I ended the call. Chapter 66. The End Game. I looked at Emma. She was silent, waiting for me to make my move. But I didn't. I couldn't. The king's empire was not something that could be destroyed in a single moment. It had spread too far, gone too deep. The game wasn't over, but I was done playing. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving everything behind. And for the first time in months, I finally felt free. The end. For now. Is Jason truly free? Or has he sealed his own fate? The game may be over, but something tells me there's more to come. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 12. The Final Betrayal, Chapter 67. The whisper in the dark. The moment I walked away, something shifted in the air. A dark weight I hadn't noticed before settled around me. I thought I was free. I thought I had cut the strings. But there was no such thing as freedom when the game had its claws in you. It wasn't over. It never would be. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I stared at the screen. A new number. "No name," I answered, heart pounding in my chest. A familiar voice spoke, smooth, controlled. "You really think you're free, Jason?" I froze. It wasn't the same voice I had heard before. It was her, Claire. Chapter 68. The Puppet Master. Her laugh echoed in my ear, cold and haunting. "Did you think you could walk away? That you could escape? No, Jason, the game never ends. It just takes new forms." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you want?" Claire's voice lowered, almost a whisper. "I want you to understand. You never were the king. You never were meant to be. You were just a pawn, a tool in a larger game." My breath caught. A tool? For what? Her voice turned sharp. "To build it. You thought the king was the end, but you were wrong. The game evolves, Jason, and now it's your turn to shape it." The words hit me like a slap. I wasn't the king. I was the architect. Chapter 69. The power play. I stood in the dark. The weight of her words crashing over me. I'd thought I could destroy everything. The empire, the power, the lies. But Claire had played me, just like she always had. The game wasn't just about control. It was about creation. And now, it was mine to build. I looked at Emma, standing silently in the doorway. She knew. She saw the change in me. "You were right." "Emma," I said, my voice hollow. "The game never ends." Her eyes filled with fear. "Jason, don't do this. We can leave. We can disappear." But it was too late. The realization had come crashing down on me, and I could feel the walls of the empire closing in. There was no escape. Chapter 70. The Final Betrayal. I had thought Emma was the one I could trust. She had been the one who pulled me from the edge, who promised that we could leave it all behind. But as I stared at her, I saw it. The doubt, the fear, the truth. I had never truly known her. She was part of this world, part of the game, a pawn. Just like me, I had built my empire on lies. But now, I saw that it was time to rewrite the rules. I stepped closer, my hand brushing against her cheek. "I know what you are, Emma. I know you've been playing me. You've been playing both sides this whole time." Her eyes flickered with fear, but she didn't pull away. "Jason, please." I took a breath. This was it, the final choice. I looked into her eyes and said the words that would end everything. I'm done with the lies. I pulled away, reaching for the drawer beside me. The last card. The king's card. With a flick of my wrist, I tossed it to the floor between us. Checkmate. Chapter 71. The New Empire. The game had changed. The pieces had shifted. And now, it was time to set the board. Emma didn't say another word. Her betrayal was as obvious as the shadows in the room. The king's empire was now mine. But this time, I would reshape it. Not with blood and manipulation, but with something else entirely. Something more dangerous. I had learned from every player who came before me. Now, I would be the one to craft the rules. No more being a pawn. No more being played. Now, I would be the game. And everyone else? They would serve me. Chapter 72. The Final Choice. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. The new empire had its own power. And I didn't need anyone telling me what to do anymore. I had built this from the ashes. I was the one who held all the cards. But as I turned to leave, one last thought gnawed at me. Had I become the thing I hated most? Or had I finally found my true purpose? The game was over, but only for me. As for Emma, her betrayal had sealed her fate. She was no longer a player, she was just another casualty of the empire I'd built. The end. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 13. The King's Reckoning, Chapter 73. The Haunting Echo. I walked through the halls of the empire I had built, the weight of the king's legacy hanging heavy on my shoulders. The once crumbling world of shadows, secrets, and lies was now mine to shape. But something was missing. I had taken control, yes, but I had lost something along the way. My soul. As I looked out over the dark city skyline, I saw the reflection of the man I had become. The very same man who once sought to escape the game, only to realize he had become it. The phone buzzed again. A message. The game is never over. Not for you, not for anyone. The words were cold and familiar. I clenched my fists. It was the king. But no, it couldn't be. The king was dead, or so I thought. Chapter 74. The Puppet Strings. I threw my phone against the wall, shattering it into pieces. But it didn't matter. The message had been clear. The king hadn't died. He had just changed forms. I walked back to the desk where his papers still lay. The king had kept meticulous records of everything, every transaction, every deal. The empire was far more organized than I had ever realized. The tendrils of power extended deep, beyond cities, beyond countries. But I had made a fatal mistake. I hadn't killed the king. I had become him. And I had become part of something much larger than myself, something that didn't care for morals, rules, or even life. It cared only about control. Chapter 75. The Betrayal. Within, I didn't expect to find Emma again. After I had cast her aside, broken the last threads of trust between us, I thought she would disappear into the darkness. But then, there she was, standing at the door, as if waiting for me. She wasn't alone. Claire stood beside her, the two women who had once been my world, my lovers, my betrayers, my downfall. Jason. Emma. Whispered. It's not over. Claire's eyes were cold, calculating. You still don't get it, do you? You're a part of something far beyond you. I stared at them, a sinking feeling growing in my chest. I thought I had ended the game. I thought I was free. Emma shook her head. You can't escape it, Jason. The game doesn't end. It never does. Claire stepped forward, her gaze piercing. You were a pawn at first, but now... She paused, her voice thick with cold pride. You're the king, and you will never leave the game. I looked from one to the other. I had tried to break free, but now I understood. The game wasn't something that could be ended. It was endless, and I had become the final player. Chapter 76. The hollow victory. I had taken the throne. I had destroyed the king. I had reshaped the empire. But in doing so, I had become everything I hated. Every choice I made, every deal I struck had led me here. And now, there was no turning back. I stared at the two women, the ghosts of my past, and finally said the words I knew were true. Am I not the king? I'm the prisoner. Claire and Emma exchanged a look. It was a look of understanding, of knowing. You always were, Claire said softly. The game never lets go of its players. We were just waiting for you to see it. I turned to leave, but as I walked out of the room, something in my chest tightened. I had thought I could control everything, but now I was just another piece in the game, trapped in a cycle with no end. Chapter 77. The shattered mirror, I stood at the edge of the empire, looking out at the sprawling city below. The lights twinkled in the distance, a reflection of the false peace I had tried to create, but it wasn't peace. It was a prison, and I was its warden. My fingers grazed the king's card in my pocket. The game would never end. I would never escape it. And neither would anyone else who dared to try. The phone rang again. This time I didn't answer, because the truth was clear. I had built this empire, but it wasn't mine to control. It belonged to the game, and the game belonged to him. Chapter 78. The final game. I was no longer Jason, the man who had once hoped for freedom. I was no longer the pawn, the victim. I had become the king. And as the game unfolded, I realized there would always be new players, new betrayals, and new rules. The game never ends, but for me, it had just begun, the end. Or is it? The game never ends. But who is really in control? Is Jason trapped, or has he just begun a new phase of the game? Let me know your thoughts. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 14. The Empire's Reckoning. Chapter 79. The cold awakening, the Empire was silent now. The hum of power that had once surged through the veins of my world had stilled, replaced by an eerie calm. I sat at the head of the table, the weight of the king's chair pressing down on my shoulders. But as I looked around, the room felt emptier than it ever had before. I had everything, and yet nothing. The empire was built on secrets, on manipulation, on lies. I thought I could shape it, control it, become something greater than the man I once was. But now, as I surveyed the cold, empty room, the only thing I felt was the emptiness. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Is the throne truly yours, Jason? Or are you just the latest fool to sit in a seat of power? I gritted my teeth. The message was clear. Someone was watching. Someone was always watching. Chapter 80. The Return of the King. I rose from the chair and walked to the large windows that overlooked the city. The lights twinkled far below, beautiful in their own way, like diamonds in a sea of darkness. But what was it all for? I had everything I thought I wanted. Power, control, wealth. But none of it could fill the void inside of me. The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. I turned, and there she stood, Claire. She was dressed in a long coat, her face pale, eyes cold, but something was different about her. She wasn't the woman I had known. This woman was something else. Claire, I started, my voice strained. She didn't say a word. Instead, she walked toward me, her eyes piercing into mine. "I told you it never ends," she whispered. "You thought you could walk away. You thought you could be free. But you can't." I stepped back. "What do you want from me, Claire?" She smiled, a cruel, knowing smile. "You're not the king, Jason. Not yet." Chapter 81. The heart of the empire. I had spent so long building this empire, shaping it, controlling it. But as Claire's words echoed in my mind, I realized something else. The empire didn't just belong to the king. It belonged to the game. The king was just a figurehead, a puppet controlled by forces far older, far darker than I could ever understand. Claire had always known this. She had always been part of it, playing the game from the beginning. And now, I was just another piece. "The game," I murmured. "It's not mine to control, is it?" Claire shook her head. "No, Jason. You've been playing the wrong role this whole time." I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. She stepped closer, her breath hot against my ear. "You're not the king, Jason. You're the victim. The one who will always be used, always be played." Chapter 82. The truth revealed I couldn't breathe. This whole time I had been deceiving myself. I thought I had taken control, thought I had become the master of this empire. But in reality, I was just another pawn, a pawn in a much larger game. Turned away, looking out at the city again. But this time, the lights seemed to mock me. They seemed to whisper, "You'll never escape." "You're not the first to fall into this trap, Jason," Claire continued, her voice soft but laced with venom. "The game has been played for centuries. People like us, people like you, are meant to fuel it. Keep it alive." I gritted my teeth, the truth stinging deeper than anything I'd ever felt. "I don't want this. I don't want the game," I whispered, my voice shaking. Claire's eyes softened just for a moment. "You don't get a choice, Jason. No one does." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. The truth was undeniable. The empire, the power, the lies. They were all part of the game. A game that had no end. I was never meant to be the king. I was meant to be the player. Chapter 83. The Reckoning. The walls of my empire were closing in, and I felt the pressure building, suffocating me. There was no escape. But then a thought flickered in the back of my mind. What if I wasn't the player anymore? What if I could stop playing the game altogether? I turned to Claire, my eyes filled with something new. Defiance. Done, I said, my voice steady. "I'm done being used. Done being a part of this." Claire's face twisted into a sneer. "You can't leave, Jason. The game will never let you." I took a deep breath. "Then I'll break it." Chapter 84. The breaking point, I reached into the drawer and pulled out the king's card, the very symbol of power, of control. The piece that had kept me tethered to this empire, to this game. I held it up in front of Claire, my fingers trembling. "You think this card has power over me? You think it controls me?" I asked, voice cold and steady. She laughed softly. "You can't escape it, Jason. You can't break the game. It will break you first." But I was done listening. I turned and walked to the window, throwing the king's card into the wind. Let it go. I had played my part, but now the game had no hold on me. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love, until my ex tried. Part 15. Breaking the Chains, Chapter 86. The silence. After the storm, the night air was cold, sharp against my skin as I stood there by the window watching the king's card flutter away in the wind, disappearing into the dark abyss below. For the first time, I felt like I had truly let go of the game, but in my heart, I knew it wasn't that simple. The empire still loomed over me. The game had too many tendrils, too many forces beyond my control. Even as I stood there, the reality settled in. There was no such thing as freedom when the game had no end. It was a system built on shadows and deception, and no matter how much I wanted to escape, it would always pull me back. But that didn't mean I had to play anymore. I heard Claire's footsteps behind me, her presence undeniable. She wasn't going to let me walk away so easily. "You think you can just quit, Jason?" Claire's voice, dripping with mockery, reached me from behind. "You think you can break free from everything you've built?" I didn't turn to face her. "I'm not quitting, Claire. I'm just done playing." Chapter 87. The Battle. Within. Her laughter echoed through the room. "Done playing? You don't get it, do you? The game doesn't end because you say it does. The game is you." I could feel her eyes boring into my back, but I kept my focus on the horizon. "I've spent enough of my life being controlled, Claire. The only person I've ever been meant to answer to is myself." For a long moment, there was silence between us. Then Claire's voice broke through it again, softer this time, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "I don't know if you'll ever truly escape, Jason. The game, it's in your blood now. You built it. You were meant to be a part of it." I finally turned to face her. Her gaze was calculating, sad, but still with that cold edge. "You've been part of it too, Claire. You helped build it." Her lips twisted into a smile, but it wasn't the one I remembered. It wasn't the one I had fallen for. It was a smile that said everything I had suspected for so long. She was always playing, always using me, but I wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm done, Claire. You can keep playing, but not with me." Chapter 88. A new dawn. I left the empire behind. I left the lies, the betrayal, the weight of all the secrets. I couldn't go back to the man I once was, the one who played the game. But I had learned something important, something I should have learned from the start. I didn't need the game. I didn't need the power. I didn't need the empire. The real freedom was in choosing my own path. It wasn't going to be easy. The shadows of my past would always be there, watching, waiting for me to stumble. But I had made my decision. I was no longer part of their game. I had to find myself again, to rebuild who I was, free from the shackles that had defined me. Chapter 89. The Return of Love. The road wasn't easy. The weight of my past followed me like a shadow, and I had to learn to live with it, to own it. But something incredible happened along the way. I found myself healing, and in the process, I found her, Emma. She had been there all along, a light in the dark, a part of my journey I hadn't fully appreciated until now. I had thought I was done with her. After all the betrayals, after everything she had been a part of, I thought I had shut that door. But as I learned to live outside the empire, as I found my true self again, I realized that she was the one who had always kept me grounded. She didn't play the game. She was the one who had been hurt by it. And somehow, amidst all the chaos, we had found each other again. We had both been broken. But now, we had the chance to rebuild. Together. Chapter 90. The last game one evening, as I walked through the quiet streets with Emma, her hand in mine, I couldn't help but wonder about the game that had shaped my life. I had escaped it, or so I thought. I had broken free of the chains that bound me. But the truth was, it wasn't about escaping the game. It was about choosing not to play anymore. As I gazed at the stars above, I felt peace. The weight that had once defined me was now gone. I turned to Emma and smiled. Maybe there's no final victory. Maybe there's no end to this story. She smiled back, her eyes full of warmth and understanding. Maybe the point isn't to win, but to find the ones who are worth playing for. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that peace settle into my soul. The end. For now. So, has Jason truly escaped the game, or has he simply learned to choose his own path? Is it the beginning of a new chapter, or merely the next phase in the endless cycle? What do you think happens next for him and Emma? Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 16. The Echo of Choices, Chapter 91. The Long Road Ahead. It had been months since I had stepped away from the empire, from the game, from all the lies, the manipulation, the power plays. The life I once thought was my destiny now seemed so distant, like a dream I could barely remember. But even in the quiet moments, the shadows of my past lingered. Emma and I had built something real, something pure. Together we rebuilt ourselves from the ground up, piece by piece. But every so often I would catch myself staring into the distance, wondering if I had truly escaped the game, or if it was merely waiting for the right moment to pull me back. Walked beside Emma, our fingers entwined, as we strolled through a park. The air was crisp, the evening sky painted in shades of deep purple and orange. The world around us seemed peaceful, unassuming, almost perfect. But I knew better than to believe perfection existed. I'd spent too long in a world of illusions. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice hesitant, the words weighing on me. "Do you think the game ever really ends? Or do we just fool ourselves into thinking we're free?" Emma looked at me, her eyes steady, unwavering. She didn't ask what I meant right away. She knew me too well. Instead, she simply said, "It ends when we stop letting it control us." Her words were simple, but there was a depth to them that resonated with everything I had learned. Maybe I hadn't completely freed myself from the game, but perhaps I had found something more important: agency. The ability to choose, to control the path I walked. Chapter 92. The Unseen Hand. But the past never stays buried for long. It was on. A quiet Tuesday morning, a day that felt too peaceful to be real when it happened. The phone buzzed and I picked it up, expecting a message from Emma or a work-related update. Instead, it was a single word, chilling in its simplicity. "I'm back." My heart skipped a beat. The sender was Claire. For a moment, I froze, the world around me blurring. The last time I saw Claire, she had walked away, telling me the game was too deeply ingrained in my blood. I had thought that was the end. But now, I gripped the phone tighter, the screen burning in my hand. Claire had always known how to manipulate me, how to pull me back into the shadows. She wasn't done with me. Not yet. I put the phone down and looked over at Emma, who was making coffee in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. I could feel the weight of the message hanging in the air, like a storm cloud ready to break. I couldn't let her know. Not yet. But a part of me, the part I tried to keep buried, wondered what Claire wanted, what she was planning. Chapter 93. The Call That Changes Everything. The call came an hour later. I couldn't ignore it. I picked up the phone, my pulse quickening, my mind racing. "Jason," Claire's voice was smooth, almost too smooth. "Did you really think you could walk away? Did you really believe that the game wouldn't come looking for you?" Her words struck a chord deep inside me, triggering something I thought I had buried. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment, gathering my thoughts. "I told you I'm done, Claire. I'm not playing anymore," I said, my voice steady, even though I could feel the pull of the past trying to drag me back. She chuckled softly, and I could almost hear the smile on her lips. "You never left the game, Jason. You're just pretending. And now the game needs you back. You don't have a choice." I felt the tension in my chest tighten. "What are you talking about?" "It's simple," Claire continued, her voice low, conspiratorial. "There are forces at play that you can't even begin to understand. The Empire is collapsing, and it needs someone to steer it, someone like you." I could feel the weight of her words settle over me. The Empire, the game, everything I had left behind. But no, I wouldn't go back. I couldn't. "I'm not interested, Claire. I've moved on." "You can't," she said. "You've always been part of it. And now, it's time to take your place again." Chapter 94. The trap is set. The call ended, leaving me in a suffocating silence. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. I had escaped. I had walked away from everything I once thought I wanted. I had found freedom. But now the game was reaching for me once more. I tried to push it out of my mind. I focused on Emma, who was setting the table for dinner, unaware of the conversation I had just had. But even in her presence, I felt the gnawing sensation of being pulled back into the shadows. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. But the question haunted me. What if Claire was right? What if the Empire wasn't done with me? What if I was always meant to be a part of it? I stood up suddenly, unable to sit still, unable to breathe. I needed to make a decision. Chapter 95. The crossroads later that evening. I stood at the door, my hand on the handle, my heart racing. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love until my ex tried. Part 17. The Final Choice. Chapter 96. Into the Abyss. The night air was colder than it had been in a long time, biting into my skin as I walked through the streets, my mind spinning. I had no clear direction, no purpose other than to escape the suffocating grip of the game, but as I turned corners, each street seemed to take me deeper into my past. The game. I had thought I'd escaped. I thought I was done. But every step felt like it was pulling me back into its web, pulling me back into the labyrinth of lies, power, and manipulation that had defined my every move. I couldn't shake Claire's words. The Empire needs you. You don't have a choice. I had to know if she was right. I had to confront it. Chapter 97. The Return of the King. I ended up at the old office, the one where everything had begun, the gleaming walls, the polished floors, the portraits of power that lined the hall. This was where I had sat, day after day, pretending to be the man in charge, pretending to have control. But it was all a lie. I pushed open the heavy door, the familiar creak of it echoing in the emptiness. The desk was still there, just as I'd left it. The chair I once sat in now vacant. The silence was deafening. I couldn't help but think about what Claire had said. You're not free. You're just pretending. But I had walked away, hadn't I? I'd chosen a different path. I had a new life, a life with Emma. Yet here I was, standing in the heart of the empire I had abandoned. Chapter 98. The Call of Power. I sat behind the desk, my fingers brushing against the cold surface, feeling the weight of decisions I had made. It had been so easy to think I was done, to think I had truly freed myself. But the truth was, this empire, this game, it didn't let go of you so easily. I reached into the drawer and pulled out the king's card. The same one I had thrown away months ago, the one Claire had mocked. I stared at it for a long moment. Was this who I was? Was I just a piece of the game, bound to this world of power and deceit? Could I ever escape it? I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned slowly, already knowing who it would be. Claire stepped into the room, her expression unreadable. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You've come back. I knew you would." I couldn't answer. The card in my hand felt like a chain, weighing me down. "I'm done, Claire," I said finally, my voice low but firm. "I'm not playing your game anymore. I've moved on." Claire's lips curled into a knowing smile. "You really think you've moved on, Jason? You think you can just walk away from everything you've built? From everything you are?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had come back, hadn't I? Chapter 99. The Devil's Bargain. Claire walked towards me, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She stopped just inches from me, her eyes burning with something I couldn't quite place. "You're not the first to think they could leave the Empire behind," she said. "But you can't. You built this world, Jason. It's in your blood." Her words wrapped around me, like a poison slowly seeping into my veins. "You don't understand," she continued, her voice softer now, almost coaxing. "This isn't about power anymore. It's about survival. The game is bigger than both of us, and it needs someone like you to steer it." I shook my head, trying to push her words out of my mind. I was done. I couldn't go back to this. But I saw the glimmer in her eyes, the way she spoke like a siren calling me to the rocks. "I'm not the same man I was," I said, my voice breaking, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "I don't want this anymore. I don't need the Empire. I don't need the lies." Claire's smile widened, but it wasn't warm. It was cold, calculating. "You can't escape it, Jason. The Empire doesn't need your permission. It doesn't need your consent. It owns you." Chapter 100. The Ultimate Choice. I stood there in the silence of the room, the weight of Claire's words crushing me. For so long, I had thought I was in control, that I could choose my fate. But now, as I stood before the remnants of the Empire, I realized just how little control I had ever truly had. The Empire wasn't something I had built. It wasn't something I had taken. It was something that had taken me, and I had never even known it. Claire's eyes never left mine. She knew this moment was the test, the moment where I would choose once and for all whether I would bow to the game again or walk away, no matter the cost. The weight of my decision pressed down on me. I had to choose. I looked at her, my heart racing, my mind spinning. The Empire, the power, the control. It was all right in front of me, within my grasp. All I had to do was reach out and take it. But as I looked into Claire's eyes, I realized something that took me by surprise. Didn't need it anymore. I took the King's card and placed it gently on the desk, my fingers lingering on its cold surface for just a moment. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love. Until my ex tried. Part 18. The Price of Freedom, Chapter 102. A quiet victory. It had been weeks since I left the Empire behind. Weeks since I walked away from the life I once thought I was meant to lead. I had found peace in the ordinary, in the simple moments with Emma. We spent our days laughing, rebuilding what had been lost. We walked through parks, drank coffee in small cafes, and talked about things that didn't involve power or betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. The weight that had always pressed on my chest, the anxiety, the fear, the knowledge that every move I made was being watched, was finally gone. I could breathe. Yet every now and then, when the night was too still, I would catch myself staring into the distance, wondering if this peace was only temporary. Wondering if the Empire, like an invisible hand, was still watching me from the shadows. Emma noticed the moments when my mind drifted. She would look at me, her eyes filled with understanding, and she would hold my hand, grounding me. "We're okay," she would say, always with a reassuring smile. "You're not alone in this. We're building something real, Jason." And I believed her. Or at least, I wanted to. Chapter 103. The Letter. Then one morning, I woke up to something I hadn't expected. A letter. It was neatly folded, addressed to me in elegant handwriting that immediately struck a chord of familiarity. My heart skipped when I saw who the sender was. Claire. I hadn't heard from her since the day I left the Empire behind. I thought I had closed that chapter. But now, as I held the letter in my hands, my stomach tightened with a mix of dread and curiosity. I opened it slowly, almost hesitantly, and began to read. "Jason, you thought you were free. You thought you walked away, but the game is never over. Not for you. I made you. You're mine. And I always get what I want. If you want Emma safe, if you want this life you've built, you will come back. The Empire needs you. I need you. Come back, or you will lose everything. Claire." I felt the ground shift beneath me as I finished the letter. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an invitation. It was a threat. Chapter 104. The Shadow of the Past. I dropped the letter, my mind racing. The Empire. Claire. The game. It was all pulling me back in. I had tried to forget, to move on, but Claire's words haunted me. The game is never over. For a moment, the world seemed to close in on me. I looked over at Emma, who was standing in the kitchen, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. What did this mean for us? What did it mean for the life we had started to build? I couldn't lose her, not after everything we had been through. But the price of freedom, I now realized, wasn't just about escaping the Empire. It was about choosing to stay out of it. Even when it came looking for you, I had always been part of the game. But could I break free? I needed answers. Chapter 105. The return to the Empire. I couldn't sit with the uncertainty any longer. I had to confront this. I called Claire. The phone rang once, twice. Then finally, she answered. "Jason." Her voice came through the phone, cold and familiar. "I knew you would call." "Where's Emma?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "What do you want from me, Claire?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really think you're in control, don't you? You think you can walk away from the Empire and live your little life with Emma and pretend it's real?" I clenched my fists, my jaw tightening. "I don't want the Empire. I don't want anything to do with you or the life you're trying to drag me back into." "You don't have a choice," Claire said softly, as if it were a fact. "The Empire is coming for you, Jason, and this time it's not just me you'll be dealing with." I swallowed, a cold shiver running down my spine. "What do you mean?" Her silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Then, with a sharp breath, she spoke. "Everything you've built, everything you've tried to protect, it's all in danger. And if you don't come back, you'll lose it all. Your life with Emma, your freedom, your future. I'll make sure of it." Chapter 106. The Brink of Destruction. I ended the call, my hand trembling as I held the phone. The weight of her words pressed down on me, suffocating me. The Empire was coming. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a promise. I couldn't let Emma get caught in the crossfire. I couldn't let her pay for my mistakes, for my past. I had to protect her. But what was the price? What would I have to sacrifice to keep her safe from the Empire's reach? I felt the old, familiar tug, the call of power, the weight of the game. But I couldn't let myself go back to it. Not for me, not for anyone. But I couldn't just run away. I couldn't let Emma face the consequences of the choices I had made. Chapter 107. the final decision. I found Emma later that evening sitting on the couch, her eyes soft but filled with concern. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love, until my ex tried. Part 19. The Reckoning, Chapter 108. The Choice of Sacrifice. The days that followed the phone call with Claire were a blur. I couldn't shake the weight of her threat, nor could I ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. I had no way of knowing whether she was bluffing, but everything she said had the cold ring of truth. The empire didn't just vanish. It had built its roots deep into my life, into my very identity. Every step I had taken away from it had felt like escaping from a shadow, but now the shadow was catching up with me. I knew one thing. If I didn't act quickly, Emma and I would be caught in a storm far beyond our control. That night I sat across from Emma, the flickering candlelight between us casting long shadows on the wall. Her eyes, as always, were filled with trust, but that trust, so pure, so unwavering, was now my greatest burden. "I have to go back, Emma," I said, my voice heavy with regret. The words burned on my tongue. She stared at me in shock, unable to comprehend. "What do you mean, Jason? You don't have to go back. We've already escaped that life." I clenched my hands into fists. I wish it were that simple, but I can't let them destroy everything we've worked for. I can't let Claire and the Empire drag you into this. Emma's gaze faltered, her lips trembling. "Jason, you don't have to do this. We've moved on. We have a future now. I can't lose you again." The desperation in her voice cut through me like a blade, but I had no choice. The Empire wouldn't just leave us alone. Claire would make sure of that. "I'm doing this for us," I said softly, "because I love you. I need to protect you from this." Her tears fell quietly, but there was no argument. She knew this battle wasn't one I could fight alone. Chapter 109. The return of the king. I drove to the familiar towering building, the headquarters of the empire, the heart of the power I had left behind. Every mile I traveled felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. Every inch closer to the building, the empire, felt like it was pulling me back into its dark clutches. The city skyline loomed ahead, and I could feel the ghost of my former self walking beside me. The man who had built this empire, the man who had sacrificed everything to climb to the top. But I was no longer that man. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire had been right. The game had never let me go. I entered the building with no fanfare. No one stopped me. I wasn't a guest here. I wasn't an outsider. I was a part of it, even if I didn't want to be. Claire was waiting for me in the same office, the same pristine space where so many of my decisions had been made. She stood by the window, looking out at the city as though it was her kingdom. And in many ways, it still was. "You came back," she said, her voice colder than I remembered. I couldn't find the words at first. My heart was heavy with the weight of everything I had to leave behind. But finally, I found the strength to speak. "I'm here to make sure you leave Emma alone. I'll do whatever you want. Just keep her out of this." Claire turned, a smirk, curling her lips. "It's not about Emma, Jason. It never was. This is about you." I stiffened. "I'm not playing your game anymore, Claire." "You never stopped playing," she countered. "You were just pretending to be someone else. But deep down, I know you still crave the power, Jason. You always have." I didn't deny it. The temptation was there, like a whisper in the back of my mind. But I had chosen to walk away. I wasn't going back to that life. Not for her, not for anyone. Claire stepped toward me, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "You don't get it, do you? You're the only one who can keep this empire from falling apart. I didn't want to bring you back. I didn't want to beg you. But I will. If I have to. Her voice was soft now, coaxing. You're the key to everything. Without you, it all crumbles. I didn't answer right away. I had to think. I had, to be sure. I couldn't just give in to the lure of the empire again. You don't control me anymore, I finally said, my voice low but resolute. Claire's eyes flashed with a dangerous gleam. She wasn't used to being defied. I control everything, Jason, she replied, and you will bend to my will, one way or another. Chapter 110. The Confrontation. The days that followed were filled with tension, each moment carrying the weight of a decision I had already made but couldn't seem to escape. Emma could sense my inner turmoil, but I kept telling her that everything would be okay. I kept telling myself the same thing, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Claire wasn't going to let me go, and the empire was pulling tighter around me, like a noose that would tighten until there was nothing left. One evening, as I returned to my apartment, I found an unexpected visitor waiting for me at the door. It was my ex-wife, Caroline.